Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to the From a Certain Point of View podcast. This is the weekly POV, and I am Josh. I'm so glad that you've decided to join me. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast app in audio form or watching on YouTube, I appreciate it no matter how you're watching or listening to this. And I think sometimes I have to keep in mind that when I'm showing things on the screen for YouTube, I do have some audio listeners out there as well. So I appreciate that and bear with me if um, I don't keep that in mind sometimes. Now, I know last week looked a little bit different. I didn't have an audio podcast last week because we had the Last of Us premiere episode that came out that I did a YouTube review on. And we also had a Mandalorian 3 trailer that dropped during Monday Night Football. So I recorded a reaction video, and kind of a little bit of a breakdown of that trailer, which I'm very excited about, Mando Season 3. But yeah, I would encourage you to check out those videos on the YouTube channel From a Certain Point of View. Make sure you subscribe to the channel while you're there, and I would really appreciate it. But I'm going to talk a little bit about, if you're new to the show, I talk a little bit about what I've been up to, what I've been watching, any recommendations that I have. And then we usually get into the news that happened over the past week. And this week, I'll also be reviewing episode 2 of The Last of Us. The episode was called Infected. So make sure you stay tuned for all that good stuff on this week's show. So what have I been watching and doing? Well, I want to mention first that I just turned 37 years old last week, and for my birthday, my wife and my daughter Sydney gifted me with my first ever Lego set. I know it's probably hard to believe at 37, but I'm gonna show that on the video here for those that are watching. This is the Luke Skywalker Red 5 helmet. And so I'm putting that together right now. I'm very excited about it. It's kind of a new hobby of mine. So this is what I have going so far. I've done parts 1 and 2 so far. So it's basically the base and part of the helmet is what I have going so far. So I've been, also listening to some vinyl records because I got a record player for my birthday as well. I've been enjoying some classic vinyl records on that too. Just if you want to know a little bit about me and what I've been doing. But yeah, that's what I've been up to lately. And this past weekend, we had a movie night at home, which I love to do. It's one of my favorite pastimes. And we watched No Way Home on 4K, the physical copy. And I gotta say, I really love this movie. Of course, I watched it when it came out and everything, and I think I saw it when I first got it on 4K and everything. But I wanted to revisit it again. I don't know why. I just got in the mood to watch it again, and I just love this movie. I think from start to finish, it's so good, and I feel like it's just this culmination of 20 years of Spider-Man, and I never would have imagined that this movie would happen, but it did, and I'm someone who's been following Spider-Man since the Tobey Maguire years, back in the early 2000s, and I was a big fan of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. Um, I especially loved Spider-Man 2. That was my favorite of the trilogy. But I also, I watched the Andrew Garfield ones. I honestly wasn't a huge fan of those, but I really love Spider-Man, and I've loved the Tom Holland trilogy. But this movie was just like amazing, and how it pulled all of the characters together and gave you a flavor of all of those villains and heroes from the past iterations of Spider-Man. This movie is just so well done. There's great comic relief, the interactions between, you know, you got Tom Holland, you got Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire, and their interactions are just priceless. And seeing some of these villains back in their roles, just doing an awesome job. Like Doc Ock was just amazing in this movie, and Green Goblin. Um, Willem Dafoe's performance is just outstanding. So it's just, man, it's such a great movie. If you haven't seen it, definitely watch it. Or if you haven't seen it in a while, go back and revisit that one. So that is one of my recommendations. And I also have been trying to keep up with the Bad Batch. So today I want to talk about the past two episodes that were released just a little bit. The first one is the Solitary Clone. Um, this one was pretty cool. It featured Crosshair, quite a bit in this episode. We hadn't seen him in this season up to this point, and I one of the things that really stood out to me was actually the opening shot on Desix. And it looked like it was maybe a sunset or a sunrise, and just and on Disney Plus they had this show in 4K and Dolby Vision and everything. And sometimes I don't know how much of a difference that's going to make in animated, but it was just there's some beautiful shots in this show for sure, and that was one of them. So basically, if you haven't watched this episode yet, the Solitary Clone, basically, the Empire trying to take control of different systems and everything, but Desix wants to be recognized as an independent planet, with the help of some repurposed battle droids. So these most recent two episodes of the Bad Batch definitely feature some callbacks to the Phantom Menace and the prequels, definitely, with the battle droids. And it was cool to see here Commander Cody here in this episode too. That was kind of neat to see, and just trying to figure out some of these characters' motivations, and Commander Cody, and which way is he going to go? Is he going to follow these orders of the Empire, or is he kind of going to go Rogue One, or not Rogue One, but is he going to go rogue, kind of like Rex did and everything? And so it was a pretty cool episode. I enjoyed it. It didn't like blow me away or anything, but it was good. And then the most recent episode that came out last Wednesday is called Faster. And yeah, so we definitely had some pod racing in this episode. If you were a fan of that in the Phantom Menace, I think you'll really enjoy this in this episode. Now, I always felt like the pod racing scene in the Phantom Menace was a little bit overlong, and but I enjoy it, when I go back and watch it and everything. But this was cool. And it was called something else. It was called Riot Racing, and it wasn't happening on Tatooine or anything. It was happening on another planet that I can't pronounce right now. Safa Toma, maybe. I'm not familiar with that planet, but this storyline focused on the Sid character, and Wrecker and Tech and Omega were trying to help this character out. Maybe she has some debts she's trying to pay off, and Riot Racing is the way she's going to get that money. I thought it was really cool that her driver, her pilot, or her racer rather, was Teo, and it was a droid. And this droid is just like so cocky and like overconfident, but like it's in a hilarious way. And he keeps getting just like blown apart, and it's just so fitting. Like you have this really cocky, overconfident character that's just getting it. he's just really like facing the consequences of his egotistical nature. But yeah, this was a very cool episode of and featured some pod racing, so I enjoyed that too. So so far I am enjoying the Bad Batch season 2. So let me know, what do you guys think? What do you think of the Bad Batch season 2 so far? Let me know in the comments. And now it is time to head over for this week's news. And we're going to start off with some news that came out today on, I guess it was on Twitter, through James Gunn's Twitter feed. And he talks a little bit about casting here. We have some fans that are pleading with James Gunn. I mean, they're already so angry with him because he is not casting Henry Cavill as Superman, which I don't think is a Greek tragedy or anything. I mean, I liked Cavill in the role, but there are other people that can play Superman, even though I really loved his performance of it. Maybe they're trying to take this Superman in a different direction. Maybe even, and I don't know at all, this is just wild speculation, or maybe I heard a rumor about this, or maybe it's true. I really don't know. But I mean, is it possible that the Snyderverse could go over to Netflix or something like that, and maybe, I don't know if they're willing to do that. I mean, if I was Warner Brothers, I certainly wouldn't. Just kind of give Zack Snyder and Netflix the rights to those characters and everything. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm sure there's some reason behind James Gunn recasting Superman. But anyway, this person on Twitter was pleading with him not to cast Guardians of the Galaxy actors in the DCU because this person wants fresh actors that can forge new memories for audiences. And James Gunn responded by saying, and I love how direct he is and how transparent he is most of the time. He says, "We have hundreds of roles to cast, as I've always done. Some will be brand new faces, some will be actors I've worked with before, and some will be actors who I've never worked with. What matters most is the actor fits the role and they're easy to work with." So guys, James Gunn knows what he's doing. Um, he's a creator, and this is the issue I have with people that just like put all their thoughts and all their emotions and everything out on Twitter, and get really fired up with these creators, so, whether it's a director or these writers of films and TV shows. And it's like, let them do their job. I'm a firm believer in letting people do their job. We are the viewers, we are the audience. It is our job to watch the content. And then if we want to give an opinion about it, we can. But unless you're a content creator, I don't think you should really have anything to say about what you know these people decide to do with they're doing their job. Um, I don't know. That's just always been my opinion on it, and you might disagree with me. You might have a completely different opinion. I know these properties are very people are very invested in them, whether it be Star Wars or Marvel or DC and all these franchises. And I know there's a lot of investment and time you put into the characters, and I respect that and understand that. But at the same time, I think we do have to give the creators a chance to create, and then we'll decide what we think about it. But that's just from my point of view, and I respect if you have a different one. But yeah, James Gunn, it sounds like he maybe will use some characters from or some actors from the Guardians movies in DC. He was also asked if there is some of the slate still being announced this month, and he said yes. So some of the slate will be announced. So I'm looking forward to see what those announcements might be. Okay, so first up, from coming from Netflix, we have the Cobra Kai season 6 teaser trailer, which previews the final season of Cobra Kai, which is, you know, kind of sad that it's coming to an end, but at the same time, I think it had a really good run. I think it's appropriate to only for this show to only go, like 5 or 6 seasons. I've really enjoyed the show. Admittedly, I haven't watched season 5 yet. I still need to do that. I have such a long list of shows that I've been wanting to watch, and that's definitely one of them. Um, but yeah, I think I'm happy with this. It's again a little sad to see it go, but I think it'll have a nice ending, and you don't want your shows to go too long and overstay their welcome. So, and it seems like this show is going to be coming sometime this year. I feel like this show has really gone through its seasons very quickly. I mean, I feel like they have at least one season out every year. If sometimes it feels like they have 2 seasons in a year, but that could just be my everything being a blur for me right now in life. So who knows? But if you enjoy Cobra Kai, it is coming to end with its sixth and final season. We're going to jump over to some video game news. We have a Hogwarts Legacy cinematic trailer that was released on January 18th. And I'll go ahead and play some of that while we talk about it. While we don't get a bird's eye view of this game, we do get an owl's eye view, if you will, of the game, in kind of a more cinematic version. This one is coming out soon. I know my wife is really excited about this. She even told me, she was like, "Josh, I don't think we should get anything else for Valentine's Day for each other, and just get me this game." and we'll play it. And I'm like, okay, at least I have that figured out. So it's one less thing to figure out. But right now, I'm trying to figure out where I should order it because on Amazon, I tried to pre-order it today and it's saying that it won't be here till like a week after it comes out. So I'm like, should I take my chances with trying to find it in store on release day? Or, I tried Best Buy, which said I could pick it up the day it releases, but then my cart wouldn't load at all. So um I don't know if you guys have any advice on where to order this to get it maybe close to the day that it releases. That'd be awesome. And what do you guys think? Are you excited about Hogwarts Legacy? I think it'll be really cool to step in to this world and everything. With another immersive experience. So, um, Hogwarts Legacy. That's coming. You can pre-order it now, and it comes out. Let's see, it's Friday, February 10th, and then there's the deluxe edition. I think maybe comes out a little bit sooner than that, possibly maybe on the 7th. That's what's in my mind right now. So that is some video game news, and we're just jumping all over the place right now. We are going to jump back to Netflix, and they had a save the dates video for 2023 film preview, um, featuring Rebel Moon from Zack Snyder, and Extraction 2, the Chris Hemsworth led sequel. And Rebel Moon, if you don't know, and you're a Star Wars fan or not, I guess Zack Snyder had pitched this idea to Lucasfilm for this, this Rebel Moon storyline. I don't know how close it'll be to what he pitched, but I'm interested to see what it ends up being, and if it's similar, if it feels like it could fit into the Star Wars universe. I'm curious to see that, um, but yeah, Netflix released some dates of their movie releases in 2023, including Luther, The Fallen Sun on March 10th, Murder Mystery 2 on March 31st, Extraction 2 comes out on June 16th. Let's see what else. And Rebel Moon on December 22nd. Some of these other ones I'm not sure so much about, but that's what's coming to Netflix in 2023. And finally, we are going to talk about why Ant-Man 3 kicks off MCU's Phase 5. This James, no, okay. Kevin Feige recently sat down for an interview with Empire Magazine, and he discussed the decision to let Ant-Man kick off the next era of the MCU. Um, he says we wanted to kick off Phase 5 with Ant-Man because he'd earned that position. Um, like he said, to not simply be the backup or the comic relief, but to take his position at the front of the podium of the MCU. The first discussion we had was, what if Ant-Man is accidentally in an Avengers movie by himself? And this is going to be directed. This is directed by Peyton Reed, and you know, I really like this idea. I like the idea of Paul Rudd, Scott Lang leading and kicking off Phase 5. I've always enjoyed his character and Paul Rudd's performance of this character. I think he even has, and we saw this a little bit in Endgame, where he had a little bit of a dramatic touch to his performance as well, and it got a little bit more serious in certain moments, especially concerning his daughter and those that were lost in the blip and everything. Um, so I am excited to see this and excited to see Kang being the villain in this movie. And, of course, I will always enjoy Paul Rudd's comedy, but I'm interested here too to see maybe a more dramatic turn in his performance as well. So, what do you guys think? Are you excited for Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which comes out on February 17th? Let me know in the comments. And that wraps it up for the news this week. So now we are going to get into my review of The Last of Us. Okay, so The Last of Us episode 2. This episode is called Infected, and this episode really got into some video game moments for me, for sure. If you were a player of the video game, But I think even if you're not, you'll still enjoy this episode. So once again, in the beginning of the episode, we get a flashback. This time it's a flashback to right before the outbreak. And there is a mycologist who, I guess they study, funguses or whatever, is taken to one of the first victims of cordyceps. And we can see that, this is, a worldwide type of thing that's happening here. And I felt like it was just such a chilling scene of her examining the body of this person who was infected, and just her explanation that there's no vaccine or no treatment for a fungal infection in humans. It shouldn't even be possible. And the whole scene was just really chilling as she's explaining this to this military officer and everything. And he's like, what do we do? How do we stop this? How do we stop this from spreading? And her advice was to bomb the city to stop the spread. So, yeah, that's like the ultimate horrible thing to have to do. And it doesn't even work, if that's in fact what they decided to do. And this, I really, again, I like this intro. I like this flashback, this idea of going back to before the outbreak and getting some more backstory on that. Craig Mason and Neil, I'm trying to think of his name, Neil Druckmann, I think. Neil Druckmann was one of the creators of the game, and Craig Mason is one of the showrunners. And they were talking about why they decided to do this. They wanted to give us more backstory in the show than we saw in the video game of how the infection started. And they wanted to go back to like that. And I love that. I think it's really interesting. And so after that flashback, which I loved, again, we get back to where Joel and Tess and Ellie are, and they're basically watching over her as she's sleeping. They're guns at the ready. They're ready. She's infected. They're ready to take her out. And they're still very like leery about this whole situation. Joel more so, I think, than Tess. I think throughout this episode, Tess displays some belief in Ellie and some belief in her being immune, and maybe the possibility of even a cure, whereas Joel doesn't have a whole lot of hope. And we see that throughout the episode, and it takes this big event at the end for Tess to even push Joel to maybe believing in Ellie or having some type of hope in this episode. So another thing about this episode that I really loved were some of the incredible shots of Boston in ruin and the overgrowth of the vines and weeds. And it just really, really looked awesome. It looked great and felt like the video game, looked like the video game once again. There were a lot of things that referenced the video game and looked and felt like the video game in this episode. Ellie references the exploding fungus spores, which aren't part of the show, but it was cool that she referenced that. And the creators of the show again made a very conscious decision to change a little bit the way the infection spreads in the show versus the video game. And in the video game, there's two ways that the infection spreads, and it's either by like a bite basically from the infected, or if there's a large kind of concentration of spores in a given area, then you could become infected. And by the way, some of this information I'm getting is from also listening to the Last of Us podcast, which is an HBO official podcast with the creators of the show, and the actor who played Joel in the video games actually too. So I recommend that podcast as well. So yeah, in this episode, we also get the clickers for the first time. We get some really creepy shots, like inside of some buildings. The inside of the hotel under the water looks so much like the game, and even my wife Brittany recognized it and was like, "Oh, I remember you playing that in the game." And there were just a lot of things like that, like the flashlights and Ellie's flashlight, the way that it was attached to her backpack was just like it is in the game. Her wearing the red hoodie and jeans. Towards the end of the episode, her crossing the rooftop on like a plank of wood. All of those things were just so nostalgic. um, of the game and everything. And this whole episode was packed with tension. I was on the edge of my seat and just scared the whole time as they're walking through this museum, and it's dark, and they're trying to walk around and trying to be silent. They're climbing up these steps. You hear the sound of that clicker, and it's just again, if you're a player of the game, that sound is so iconic, and I know it will be now for people who are just watching the show. And it's just that creepy sound of that clicking noise that's happening. And so I thought this was another great episode. And this is definitely a spoiler warning right here. If you haven't watched the episode, go back and watch it before you watch the rest of this review. But in this episode, I knew this was inevitable. I knew at some point, Tess was going to get infected, and she was going to leave the show, or and die. So towards the end of this episode, Tess does get bit and she gets infected. It happens off screen. The audience doesn't really know about it. Joel doesn't know about it. Ellie's the first one who kind of suspects it in this scene towards the end, in the Capitol building. And it's really her being bit and then showing Joel, like, look at the difference. I was bit just a few minutes ago, and I'm already infected. It's already spreading, and look at Ellie. And because Joel is just not believing this. Even earlier in the episode, he's like, "Oh, we've heard this before. She's the last hope for humanity. She is immune." And Joel's just like, "We've heard this stuff before. I'm not believing in this." But Tess actually shows him the physical evidence of Ellie being immune, and hopefully that's enough to push him into believing in this whole thing a little bit. But there were a couple things about this show that did have me scratching my head. If I were to nitpick or have a little bit of some negatives, they definitely changed some things from the game, which nothing so far has been a deal breaker, but it does make me, kind of scratch my head a little bit. Like, one thing this episode introduced that was not a part of the video game was that all of the infected are connected. And they're even connected through the fungus that grows underneath the ground and everything, or in the ground. And so, like, touching a piece of the fungus could alert an infected person that's like way over here, alert that person, and then they all kind of, and that's what happens at the end of this episode. Um, all of these infected are running towards them, running towards the building that they're in, and Tess basically, tells them to go, and she tells Joel, "Save who you can save." I think Joel is just really has this kind of savior complex type of thing going on, and he wanted so badly to save his daughter. He still wants to save his daughter. He saw in the first episode when Ellie was about to be shot, he saw his daughter being shot and wants to save her in that moment, because it's like saving his daughter. But here I think Tess is saying, "Save who you can save." Um, she knows she can't be saved. She knows Joel's daughter can't be saved. She's already gone. But you can save Ellie, I think, is what she's saying to her in that moment, or what she's saying to him in that moment is, you can save Ellie. Believe in her. There is hope here. There could be a cure. So, and then she goes out with a bang in that, I believe, in the Capitol building, as she, draw all the infected are drawn into that building, and then she basically, like, pours out some gasoline and grenades, and lights it up. But not before we get this really creepy scene of one of the infected, um, almost like kissing her with the tendrils, and that just felt weird to me, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. Um, so this episode had some really great things about it. A couple things that had me scratching my head a little bit, like all the infected being connected, which was a change, and then that kind of weird kissing scene at the end with Tess and one of the infected, which was just, again, weird to me. But overall, this episode was great. I'd give this one probably a 9 out of 10, where the first one I'd give a 10 out of 10. And I am just loving this so far. Again, I think it's definitely a show that somebody who played the video game can appreciate aside from some nitpicks and differences, which you're going to have. And the creators do. What's nice is by watching the inside the episodes and listening to the podcast, you get their reasoning behind the changes, which is nice, and that helps. Like the reason that all of the infected are connected and the fungus are connected, it has scientific basis to it. And the reason they don't have the spores and everything has a good explanation. So, you can dive as deep into the show as you want. I'm diving as deep as I can into it by watching the inside the episodes and listening to the podcast. Or maybe you're just a person who's just enjoying the show. But what are your thoughts on this week's episode of The Last of Us called Infected? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section. So please let me know, or there's other ways to connect with me. And so thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to mention some of those ways you can connect with me. You can connect with me on this YouTube channel, From a Certain Point of View, in the comments section. On Facebook, we are From a Certain Point of View. On Twitter, that's at Certain POV Pod. So you can tweet at Certain POV Pod. And you can send me an email at certainpovpod@gmail.com, where you can ask me anything, or give me any ideas you have for upcoming shows. And once again, this podcast is part of the Red 5 Network. They can be found on red5network.com and on Twitter at Red5Network. So be sure to check out the Red 5 Network and stay tuned from the Certain Point of View podcast for your movie news, reviews, and points of view. And until next time, everything I said today was true from a certain point of view.